when our loved ones go through pain, is it because of their karma or ours? And is there any sadhana we can do on their behalf which would lead to their absolution of pain or something like that? So, look, talking about Buddha, as we touched upon him in the previous question, pain is inevitable. Anybody who aspires to have a life free of pain is kidding themselves. They should put themselves in a freezer and stay there forever. It's not possible. It is impossible for a human being or any living entity to lead a life devoid of pain. It is impossible. But you don't have to suffer. That is optional. Does that pain mean you are suffering? Or no? When Ramana Maharishi had to be operated on, the story goes, I think then I also recall that wasn't the story, but I do remember reading this. He took a piece of cloth and a twig wrapped in a piece of cloth, and he clenched it in his teeth as they operated on his arm, which was, he had skin cancer. And the doctor before that said, look, it's going to be very painful. And Ramana Maharishi said, my whole life has been based on this single question, who am I? That I'm not the body, I'm not the soul, I'm something beyond. These things belong to me. These things are a part of me. So who in me is really going to experience that pain? And he went through that exercise. And he, all his life, he just lived on that mountain Arunachala, never descended. At least that's what I read, that he never came down from the mountain. That's where he lived throughout his life. So pain is inevitable. The amount of suffering we experience from the pain of those who are attached to us, our loved ones or otherwise, is directly proportionate to the degree of attachment we have, and possibly the degree of ignorance we have. There was a Zen monk. He always taught the concept of impermanence and emptiness. And it so happened his young son died. When his young son died, he was crying at his funeral. I'm pained that my mother's coughing right now. So his young son died, and at his funeral, the Zen monk was crying. माता रानी आपको नजर लग गई है मुझे लगता है. So his disciples asked him, he said, "Oh Master, we are very surprised. We thought you were awakened. We thought you were enlightened. You always said this world is an illusion. Why are you now crying at the death of your own son?" He said to his disciple, he said, "Look, I don't deny that this world is an illusion, but let me tell you, it's a very powerful illusion. And that's what I'm experiencing right now," the monk said. So it is normal that we experience pain at the pain of our loved ones. But you have to go through it. And that is why perhaps Buddha said, everything is suffering. This world is suffering. And that is why Guru Nanak said, Nanak dukhiya sab sansar. That ultimately, that is the essence of it all. And that we have to go through pain. But the reason we do satsang, the reason we pray, the reason we do sadhana, the reason we reflect on our inner world, the reason we sit in the company of wise ones or seek knowledge is predominantly so we don't suffer on account of that pain. As Neem Karoli Baba, this very famous incident from his life, a group of disciples wanted to see if he was really enlightened, and one of them took a pin with him. When he touched his feet, he stuck it in his toe, big toe. And naturally, Baba winced for a moment, and he said, the body is in pain, but I am not. So if somebody is hit with a stick, you will feel the pain. Impossible that you won't, unless you are numb in that area or whatever. But that doesn't mean you will say, now I must seek my revenge against this person, which is the beginning of suffering. If you say, why did this happen to me? I've always been so good my whole life. Why did this happen to me? That is the beginning of suffering. And sometimes you have to wade through the river of suffering to really emerge purified and clean and cleansed at the other end. Because it makes you question everything. And then after a period of denial and disbelief, and then acceptance, when you settle down and then you reflect on it, you start to see the truth of everything there is. You find your own ground then. And then that is the beginning of awakening. Is there a sadhana you can do for your loved ones? Well, you can perhaps pray for them. You can send them a lot of love. The easy thing is to pray for them. But it's like this, if somebody is sick, will that person become better if I started taking their medication? I doubt it. They have to. But there is a thing called placebo, so maybe a bit of that psychologically they may feel better. But the harder thing is what they really need is even harder to give, which is great behavior. At that time, they need a lot of your love and acceptance and other difficult things, which require you to actually be there and put up with it. But we often think I'll hide behind some mantras or some prayers and that would be the end of it. That's the easy part. When you're praying in your own time, nobody's confronting you. There is no conflict. There is no challenge. The truth of your spiritual progress is only ascertained once you are actually face to face with the people who challenge you, with the circumstances that are opposing, with those ones around you who you are in conflict with. So I can't say there is no sadhana. Like I said, it depends. You can pray for them. But I read this somewhere. If you think you're enlightened, spend a weekend with your family. And then come back and tell me on Monday.